Renaissance Man. It's a title many are given, but few deserve. Gregg Hurwitz is one of those few. Harvard graduate, master's from Trinity College at Oxford, pole vaulter, and college soccer player. And writer. But calling Gregg Hurwitz just a writer is like calling Paul McCartney just a bassist. By the time Orphan X hit bookshelves in 2016, Hurwitz had already published 14 novels, 2 young adult titles, and numerous comics in both the Marvel and DC universes. He was also an accomplished screenwriter and television producer. Beyond entertainment, Hurwitz has written extensively about Shakespeare in academic journals, and about politics and culture in publications such as the Wall Street Journal and The Guardian. But in the tale of orphan-turned-lethal government operative Evan Smoke, Hurwitz created a character who has taken his place alongside the icons of the thriller genre and catapulted him to the top of international bestsellers lists. Do you need my help? Those 5 words have been the reader's entry into 5 heart-stopping novels full of exceptional characters, exhilarating action, and innovative resolutions. Now, in Prodigal Son, Evan Smoke answers one more plea for help. But this one is closer to home. And for the Nowhere Man, home is an unfamiliar place.
Hi, I'm Gregg Hurwitz. Make sure you're watching the Crew Reviews for the latest in crime fiction, thrillers, and mysteries.
Hey boys, let's raise a glass. We have the great and powerful Gregg Hurwitz coming to the Crew Reviews.
How are you?
Cheers, boys.
Cheers. Dude, Prodigal Son. Book's coming out later this month. It was awesome. We were talking just before the show how impressed we are with this book, with your writing. But let's jump into some of the questions. In this book, you lay bare Evan Smoke's origin story. Was it satisfying to pull the skin off that onion back to its core, or do you find it difficult to reveal so much of Orphan X's past?
I always had in my head that at some point we would get back to the true origin of where it all started. Well, everyone's a critic, huh?
We all are.
Clearly.
Do you want to use that to like prop open a window or something next? Or are we good? Even out the dining room table? No, I knew that I wanted to get back to the true origin of the foster home and the dynamics there at some point. I was just holding it off. And it's funny because, you know, I thought I might have some of that in Orphan X, like in the very first one in the series. And I kept waiting and sort of just teasing out these pieces. And it was finally time, you know, it's a story that takes Evan all the way back to his past. It takes him all the way back. And so I thought, what better chance or opportunity am I going to have in telling an Orphan X mission where he has to pry back through this past that he's left behind. And he's got a lot of sort of something like survivor's guilt, I think. He was pulled out of that foster home, trained up to be an assassin. And, you know, while it might be one of the worst things that could happen to a human being to be trained and molded into a disposable weapon, it was also the best thing that ever happened to him, right? Yeah. I mean, Jack Johns, his handler, loved him, put him in the world. I mean, he learned how to drink fancy vodkas and travel the world over, and he should have been dead. He should have been in jail. He should have been overdosed or, you know, working in a
he gets a glimpse of what his life would have been like if he didn't get pulled out.
That's right. He should have been kind of dead in jail or, you know, lost, not doing well, you know, overdosing on drugs. And so that's where most of his crew is. And this story opens up. And while it's I wanted to do a sort of very, you know, large mission. I like the thriller aspects. I like the action. I always want to keep those things in there and try and have it be propulsively readable. But increasingly what I'm finding is my favorite scenes are the intimate, quiet, the moments between characters. You know, there's a scene in this book. It's so funny because often, you know, we think about like the big action scene or something that's the most connected. There's a scene in this book where Evan realizes to get a clue, he has to go back and visit somebody who he knew back when in the foster home in prison.
Right.
And he goes into the prison and sits down across from this guy he hasn't seen since he was 12 years old and pulled out of the home. And that for me was the most emotional. It's like, looking into a mirror of the future he didn't have. Right. And there was just so much emotion in that scene of the guy who was his friend from back then kind of saying, you're not any better than me. You make sure you remember that. Mm-hmm. And Evan knows that to be true also. He knows that he caught all these breaks, but also that we are what we make of ourselves in our lives. And so it's very conflicting. It opens up with a call from a woman who identifies herself as his mother. He never, knew his mother. He never knew his father. He doesn't know if it's a scam. He doesn't know if he's being played and drawn out from cover. And so there were sort of two arcs to the story. One was the kind of big action thriller aspect of this plot that keeps increasing and growing larger. And the other is this really intimate thread about Evan discovering who he is and having to pry open different kinds of vulnerabilities for himself.
Yeah. Well, expanding upon that, so Evan's background as an orphan, obviously is rich with possibilities. You could have done a million things, and you've given us tidbits as the books have gone along, a little bit about his past. But how much of his origin story has been mapped out in your head for a long time, and how much of it did you discover writing this book?
A lot of it was mapped out. I knew a lot of it. But of course, once you get it, you got all the sculpting clay, right? But once you thunk the mound down on the table and start to shape it and integrate it into a story, because there's flashbacks. I want to leave them where they're like dominoes, right? It ticks over something in the present ticks over something in the past. And the whole book isn't told that way in flashbacks. But once I started to get into the kind of muck, the primordial ooze of the story stuff, it starts to shape and change a little bit. But I always had a rough direction of it, of where he came out of. We go back. One thing that was really fun is one of our dear departed, his dear departed nemesis, Charles Van Sciver, who we haven't seen since Hellbent.
Yeah.
We get to go back and see that their kind of past and where the roots of the rivalry that they've had between them. And that was really fun to do. Here we are 3 books since we've last seen Charles Van Sciver, and we get a bit of an origin story for him too, and where that all led in a plot and a story that's already resolved. So it was fun to do a lot of this threading, and the aim always is to make everything stand on its own feet. Mm-hmm. Like anyone can just pick up the story. I want to onboard new readers with every book. Anyone can just jump into the world of Orphan X. But for people who've been reading a long time, there's a ton of little dropped handkerchiefs throughout there of little clues or little mosaic pieces that stitch together with the previous books. And that was really fun.
I bet.
Yeah, you did an outstanding job of laying the groundwork for callbacks. The way I kind of viewed it is, and maybe tell me if I'm off here, but you kind of create the storytelling infrastructure that has some specificity to it, but it also has this general, and I'm talking about 3 books back, and you're like, hey, I can go a lot of ways with this. I know I can go this, I know I'm going here, but there's a lot of things I can do off this infrastructure I'm laying. Is that how you approached it?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, in a weird way, that was part of what the series was. I wrote a lot of standalones, in my career. And so when it came to a series character, I really wanted to have some sort of structure that stories could come in from surprising angles still. And that's the 1-855 to nowhere phone number, which is, you can call and you get an answer if you call it in the United States, at least. And, so I wanted stories to come in from different avenues. There's sort of the mythology stories that reach back into the orphan program, right? And we saw in Out of the Dark, which is it's sort of my homage to Day of the Jackal. It opens on his first official mission or first unofficial mission as Orphan X. And so stories can come in from the orphan program and the government that's pursuing him. They can come in through the Nowhere Man missions when that phone rings. They can come in from Castle Heights. And with this one, it comes in from, he doesn't know where it comes from. And it's the most unlikely source. The last line of Into the Fire is that encrypted, untraceable phone ringing and him answering it and a woman saying, Evan, it's your mother. And so I like to build I like to build a structure where stories can arrive from different tributaries.
Right.
So it's
right.
like the same thing.
When thriller storylines involve a significant rollout of the character's past, most writers get caught up in that info dump dilemma. And we didn't see any of that, regardless of the fact that we had so much past history brought through the story. Do you think you would have fallen into that trap if you had tried to do that early in your career?
That's such a good question. I mean, I wrote one series early on, the Tim Rackley series. There was 4 books, but it didn't feel like this. There was a good amount of backstory to kind of get out, and I was able to practice it a little bit. I think a lot of it is trying to get to the story in new ways, to try and like, what's a new way to back into the backstory, right? Like I'm dealing with that right now. I'm cracking into a new manuscript. And so I'm always trying to raise the bar so that instead of it being, here's a chapter of exposition, how's a way that we can get that story out in ways that are compelling and relevant to the plot, right? So some of this is when he encounters the woman claiming to be his mother, she asks him what he does, right? And then he can talk about it, but he's talking about it in a subtextual way.
Right.
So it's always trying to just find the handles where, everything in service to the story. That's always the rule,
Yeah.
We got to get you to do a master class on that, because I find myself as a new writer falling into that trap where I'm just like, hey, I got all this stuff. Here it is. Throw it. Read it. And then it bogs the story down. When Mike is right, man, the way you just infuse it into the story, there's no skipping a beat. It just flows. It's so good.
Sure did.
Thank you. I was thinking back early on when I had the commandments. And in the first book, I had Commandment 2 and Commandment 7 and everything else. And there was blank ones, because part of it was, it's not like I had them. I figured them out by the 2nd or 3rd book, I want to say. Part of it is when you're rolling out the commandments, when you're world building, you want people to come in on a conversation. You want people to come in the middle of a scene, right? Yeah. And so, it's not like I was going to open with the first commandment and take you through them in order. So I was putting them in different order. And what's so weird is they sort of snap together with this organic shape that, like, I'm still discovering so many things about it that there's a reason why the first commandment's the first commandment. I didn't figure it out until the manuscript I'm writing now, which we'll get to it,
what
further out. There's a reason the second commandment's the second commandment, but you always want to live in the world and have people catching up to it, and picking up bits and pieces. So I always think of the reader a bit like an eavesdropper, right? Like you're pulling them forward, and you're dropping enough that they have their bearings, right? There's good confused, there's confused curious, right? And then there's confused aggravated.
Yeah.
And so
fine line.
Right. It is. That's right. And then there's the not confused at all, which gets really boring.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, but look, I've had fantastic readers and a community around this book. I mean, we're releasing a few of the audio. We did some audio interviews with readers about the secondary characters. I did one about Joey. We're going to release one about Tommy. So it's been really fun with the community because there's all these nuances that they start to remember, right? So I can hear what the handholds are for them into certain characters and what the things are that they're looking at. And so it's always about really trying to, for me, drop in and view everything 3-dimensionally around me, right?
Okay.
And look, that's also what editing's for, right? Rewriting's to not look dumb.
Amen to that. Hey, well, I mean, you were just talking about the secondary characters. We were talking earlier about the conversations, how you can draw out more of Evan's, individual views on stuff, and the bond between him and Joey, it's changing, and it's growing stronger. Was this an expected outcome and something you planned, or did her character become more vital as you wrote her and the relationship grow organically?
So she's introduced in Hellbent. That's the 3rd novel.
Yeah.
I don't really write outlines. I mean, I have like a mess of organized thoughts, right? More than an outline, but it's always living and breathing. I always, as I write forward, I discover more things. It shifts around in my, I call it a rolling outline because it's always evolving. And Joey was supposed to die at the end of Hellbent. And you can, going back and looking at it, you can see the scene where she was going to die. And I couldn't do it because part of having her in, it's not just that she was such a delight to write, and how funny, right? She's a 16-year-old Hispanic hacker, right? And I like her voice in my head is so clear. I have such an affection for that kid. But also the ways and the things she brought out in Evan, I realize as a foil, were so essential. The ways she confounds him, confuses him, is disrespectful to him.
I love it.
Calls him out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's very different. 16-year-old, sort of niece person, as they call each other, she can be irreverent in all sorts of ways that other men can't to him, right? That you're just not going to have it. And there's such a knowingness and that, that real sense of vulnerability and affection that he has surrounding her, right? And the protectiveness. And I just loved what she did in those scenes with him and who she was. And also how she brings out, the parts of him that are rough, because he's got a lot of parts that are rough. He's gentle with her, but he's not, he's not evolved necessarily socially. I say he's unskilled in the language of intimacy. Like that's a language he didn't grow up with. And here's Joey, who herself is guarded and broken and vulnerable, but she's on the seam of her emotions in a different way. And so there's places where he missteps with her and there's real like emotional human consequences. Like she's upset in a different way because she feels his roughness as a betrayal because she trusts him so much. And so those are always the things I find that really move us closer to a character, is that when they misstep, right? When they have an emotional, like a blind spot, an inadequacy, and then they realize it and they feel horrible about it, because that's who we all are, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Not having your character be as I thought at the beginning of my career, be the best of the best. It's in all their failings that we come to really love them, and that's the texture of character, I think, in a lot of ways.
Well, I love that sub story between what's going on with Joey, like and as she's a young woman,
she's on the date,
and you could see Evan struggling with that, and misstepping obviously, and then but the connection and the way they're able to communicate is so. It just felt so real, which is, they're fictional characters, but it was so real.
I have a 22-year-old daughter and I have a 15-year-old daughter. And so I've had that exact dynamic with my kids, although I was their father, not, pseudo uncle or whatever, but I'm telling you that was one of the most authentic parts of these books is I can hear my daughter's voice in some of the things she says, and I can see my own reaction, although I'm a little bit more geared towards it than he is. But there are times, like you kind of alluded to this a minute ago, where he's upset her and has no clue why he's upset her. And he's standing there looking at this, child's reaction, wondering what the hell just happened. And I mean, that was all true, man. You nailed that. And I'm anxious for my daughter to read this book because she's going to get a kick out of it. She's going to laugh at it, my older daughter. But no.
Thank you. It's funny because 16, it's such an age too, because you're so grown up and you're such a kid.
Yeah, right? At the same time, right?
Depending what phase you're snapped into, it can really range. And so you have in Joey, she's one of the preeminent hackers in the world. She was trained as an orphan, even if she failed out of the program. Unbelievably tough. But if he hits her wrong, she's a vulnerable girl still.
Yeah, she's a child. Yeah.
The other thing that relationship demonstrates is the difference in resilience with kids and adults with emotional trauma. Sometimes kids handle and roll with things a lot quicker and a lot more effectively than we do.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
It's funny, one of the things I also have a lot of fun in the series is like the world that I've populated around Evan. It really represents, I have such a diverse range of friends. I have people from all backgrounds, all political orientations, all the everything, right? So I have a crusty old, as I think of them, like early UDT diver, right? Like probably a early pre-SEAL Team 6 kind of plank holder guy in Tommy Stojak.
Yeah, Tommy.
Where he comes into the world at culturally and politically, right? Then you have Joey, who's completely from the other end of the scale. They're both critical of Evan in different ways. I want to present them of having sort of a validity of viewpoint regardless. And then they get along, when they happen to cross paths. they get on well with each other. And that's one of the things I've always found in my life. Like I always have my friends in from the most extreme versions. You know, I'll have like a demolition breacher Navy SEAL with like the, you know, handlebar mustache, the t-shirt with the, you know, the eagle gripping the American flag in its talons. And he's always in town. You know, he would teach breaching for the FBI at LAX, or he did a lot of breaching courses for LAPD, but he'd be in town inevitably when I had like the most fancy pants Hollywoody party to go to, right? When I was in my like early 30s. And I was like, I bring them, man. You bring anyone anywhere. And it was amazing. Like initially people would have that other world reaction, right? It's a bit of a red state, blue state thing.
Yeah, sure.
But what would happen so quickly is you'd have all these people who were relatively more conventionally educated, let's say. And so initially there's a standoff, but then the overlap stitched together so beautifully where they'd be like, you know, all of a sudden it's like, wait, this guy speaks a bunch of languages. He's traveled the whole world, right? You've traveled the world one way. He's traveled the world another way. Yeah. And I still remember I was at one party where one of these guys who's, you know, was talking about the super expensive, like Nikon photographic lens he got. And my buddy was talking about the sniper scopes that they used, you know, when they were training the Taliban in Afghanistan, right, to repel the Russians. Like there's all this confluence of interests and ideas, and there's a knitting together of all that. Yeah. And so it's a lot of fun for me to have a world populated around Evan where, you know, he moves through all sorts of different quarters, and there's tons of people around, and they're all better than him at the one thing that they do.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Joey's a better hacker than him, right?
Yeah.
Tommy's a better shot than him. Tommy's a better armor and a better sniper. And so it's fun because I didn't want to ever have a character who's sort of just built up and is deified, right?
Right.
He's perfect and smooth and suave in all these ways. He needs to bring the totality of his situational awareness to the table, like everything who he is. And so I think of him a lot like Ulysses, the man of many wiles, right? He's not the best archer, but he's maybe second or third. He's like a decathlete.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's fun because there's, you know, it's great to have all these characters, all of whom have one thing that they're better than him at, you know?
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk about another aspect of character, kind of since we're on that subject. With book series, there are generally, and very generally, two schools of thought. There's the never changing character that, you know, you can always depend on what he's going to be. There's Jack Reacher is a good example of that. And then there's one who grows and evolves and changes, and John Sanford's Lucas Davenport's a good example. Evan, I think, falls into the latter category. I think there's no question he falls in the latter category. How do you engineer that growth and remain true to the character, but still develop them?
I mean, the honest answer is it's all growth that I'm having or trying to have or reach myself.
That's awesome.
And so as I get to new awareness, to new relationships, to new understandings of the world, to new dynamics, I can kind of take them with me. And so it's weird because in a lot of ways, I feel like Orphan X, it was my 16th novel. You know, I wrote them when I was on the cusp of 40. That's a big transition year.
Yeah.
You guys will get there one day.
No, I wish I could go back.
You know, but and so I think it was, you know, Orphan X is pretty muscular. There's a lot of hand-to-hand combat. There's a lot of the other stuff. And then, you know, like I was saying, my favorite scenes now are very different. They're different now of the things that I'm drawn to and I'm growing. In a lot of ways, I think I wrote a character who is out ahead of me at certain things. A lot of the practices are things I do. I do mindful awareness meditation, right? I do, but his ability of trying to be present, right? One of the aims of an operator is to view everything as if for the first time, right? That's how you don't get in a rut operationally. You notice the door that's slightly ajar, or the one vehicle that's out of place. You don't go in a rote learning with anything. Well, the same thing's true in everything. Same thing's true emotionally. Same thing's true in arguments you have with your spouse or with a friend where you're like, oh, here's the old rut again. Here's the old argument. Yeah. How do you bring a freshness and perspective to everything? And the flexibility that he strives for. And I get into this a lot more as the books move forward, where he's he's untangling and healing aspects of his body physically that's not dissimilar from emotional flexibility, intellectual flexibility, even spiritual flexibility, right? The same way that if you have an injury and all the muscles around it lock down, people ossify the same way into ideologies.
Yeah, that's so true.
Right? And you can do that emotionally, right? If you're not flexible, that you're one of those people who skips right from hurt to anger.
Yep.
That's muscle memory, right? And a lot of things lock down and tighten up around that. And so he's trying to kind of find all these connections between his body as a weapon, right? His body is a strategic imperative. And then he starts to realize all these things, like when he's with Joey, he's like, hang on a minute, right? Here's this girl who's upset, who's tightened up around a particular topic, and the same rules that apply operationally. Pretend you're seeing, assume nothing, right? First commandment. You're seeing everything for the first time, right? Don't bring preconceived notions in. How do you loosen? How do you find flexibility in a situation? Yeah. And a lot of that comes down to observational, to being present. It's a lot of the essence of what Zen is. And that's why I think he has a lot of the philosophical background when he's trained up under Jack, right? When he's 12 years old through. Jack's having him read, European history and Nazi military strategy and Japanese samurai masters and watching, opera and reading art and there's all sorts of things, but he's studying to become a sort of well-rounded, but it's got a strategic application. It's not just well-rounded so you can be a fancy Renaissance man, like from an Ivy League, right? Or to be bragging about it. It's to really have an understanding of different aspects of the world, because if you have an understanding of different cultures and different people and different subcultures and different politics, and you're more strategic, right?
Right.
Oh, yeah. Strategic imperative. And so to me, it's such an interesting thing that centers the character for me in a lot of ways that's something I'm always trying to work on and learn. And as I learn it, he learns some of it. And there's some stuff that he learns that pulls me into learning it more.
Yeah, I love that.
Well, so we've talked a lot about character and character development, but in Prodigal Son, drone technology plays a strong role in the antagonist's arsenal. The general public probably knows only a fraction of what's already developed and available out in the real world and what's to come. How many holy shit conversations did you have with Dr. Levitin when you were researching for that particular part of the book?
Oh man. Well, first of all, it was an amazing situation. So did you happen to see the documentary Jiro Dreams of Sushi? No. It's amazing. I think it's on Netflix. It's the sort of preeminent sushi, expert ordained as if for the priesthood in Japan. It's very much part of the how you do anything is how you do everything.
Right.
Everything about how he makes sushi, it is a perfection. It's a perfected art form. And he's got 2 sons who have restaurants. Anyways, it's an amazing documentary. And it's very hard to get in the restaurant, all this other stuff. So I was going to Japan and I went to his son's restaurant. I'm always obsessed with anyone who's excellent at anything, whether it's making sushi, making rifles, a plumber, hand-to-hand combat, professors. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just, if people are obsessed with excellence, I find that they're the trade craft, right, and their work ethic, they've learned so much. It's like you can do that whether you're sculpting or anything that you do, you can burrow down to the same sort of understanding. Right. So anyway, I go to this restaurant, I'm sitting next to that too, and they only have 5 people at a time, and you need a reservation forever in advance. And I went in and managed to talk my way into a seat the next day for lunch. And sitting next to me was said doctor. We started talking. I said, what are you up to? The guy has, incredible background in drone technology, all the stuff. I said, hey man, the next book that I write, the next book then is going to have this, so we had this insane meal together, right, in the heart of Tokyo in this incredible sushi place. I said, can I email you, 18 months hence when I get around to it? And he said, and it was this really funny connection. So I pinged him to hit him up. I was gathering a lot of articles and a lot of research. I have a pretty good Rolodex. Like I asked people, send me the weirdest stuff.
Yeah.
And I was gathering it all, but it was great having him. I mean, he worked on all those aspects of drone technology, how they mimic the flight patterns of, mosquitoes for the small drones, how they alight, what they can do, how they can accomplish it, how they can disseminate moral authority throughout them.
Wow.
It's a brave new world, man.
Oh.
Well, as Mike said, you created a very scary scenario in Prodigal Son involving some seriously advanced tech for Evan to overcome. And yet with something so fantastical, you made it so damn believable. I mean, as a reader, there was no suspension of disbelief whatsoever. Like I was just like, this shit's real.
I bet it's out there. Yeah.
It's like Evan. I talked to a lot of people who are way smarter than me about, a topic.
Well, let me ask you though, as the writer, did you find that was the hardest thing to overcome, to make it so believable?
No, that's not. The hardest thing is what was the hardest thing? Look, there's always a balance with that, because I can play with that. I've researched a lot in my career. I've gone up and stunned airplanes. I've blown up cars with SEALs on demolition ranges. I went down to Galapagos for a couple of weeks to research. My second book took place there. I lied and said I was a scientist to get into the Darwin station to research a particular species of mantid. I've done a lot of that kind of stuff. And so I've learned that's something I think I have down, is like, what's the iceberg under the water and what's the tip that comes up into the story.
Yeah.
So it's tricky, but not hard. But I feel like that's a muscle I've worked out enough to know what do I need to make it plausible and what's going to be one bridge too far. I think the hardest thing is keeping all the sub stories and the emotional plate spinning and making sure that they all arc, right? So it's Evan and the woman claiming to be his mother. It's Evan and Joey, right? It's Evan and, in this case, the antagonist who he's pursuing, right? Mm-hmm. There's sort of sub stories within this of Evan and the person he's helping on his mission. And to have them align, they need to align sort of in some aspect thematically, like layer cake almost, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
But you can't chart it all out. I have a friend who wants to be a writer, would send me these spreadsheets with, like things are color coded and marked out and it's all sorts of stuff. And it's like, you can't get your prefrontal cortex into it too much, right?
Yeah.
Because it's got to come out of that dark place that where we're on the edge between order and chaos when we're creating something.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's got to be instinct, and you're never sure that it's going to work right, and are you missing something? And that's always for me is the toughest part, is like, how do I have it charted enough that I know where I'm headed and making sure that everything aligns while keeping my prefrontal cortex out of the way. So it's a story people feel in their spinal cord.
Okay, so that makes me feel better. That makes me feel better that you're actually like us.
Except you were dropped as a child, and your prefrontal is all bruised up.
anyone says they have writing a novel figured out, they're not to be believed.
Yeah, no kidding.
I think if you're doing your job and pushing your craft, each book there should be a point that you're terrified that you don't know what the hell you're doing and you're not going to pull it off. Mm-hmm. Especially if you're writing, a little bit dangerously. Like I like to write stuff where I'm like, I have no idea how to make this story work. Right. That happened to me with Out of the Dark, when Evan's going after a highly corrupt president of the United States. And it was my day of the jackal. I did all this research for Secret Service.
Yeah, I was going to say, you never called me about the Secret Service, but I guess you didn't have to, because that book it fucking read awesome. So
I didn't know you as well then. But I laid it all down, and then I was just standing there. I had schematics of the presidential limo. I had all the electronic noses at the entrances. But then I amassed all the research, and I felt like I was at the bottom of a cliff, like staring up at this wall that I didn't know how to scale, let alone scale in a fashion that would be interesting or compelling or different. And so that's always the part too, is it's like, that was the thing that scared me in that book, is can I come up with a compelling enough attempt that he's going to make that feels different from everything that we've seen before. And so each book has a different set of challenges to it. And I think it should. I think everything should scare you, because if you're writing, if I'm writing and I'm really engaged, I'm going to be writing with a different kind of emotion I think that readers pick up on, frankly.
Yeah. Don't get too comfortable when you're doing it.
That's awesome.
No.
I want to shift gears a little bit. We touched on aspects of your dual career last time you were here, but you write, for people that don't know, you write television and film scripts in addition to your novels. You have Sweet Girl coming out on Netflix pretty soon.
Ooh.
And Screen Gems acquired your spec Sabine as well. How has being a screenwriter made you a better novelist? And how has being a novelist made you a better screenwriter?
Screenwriter to novelist is, let me answer that first. There's so little room on the page of a script, right? So we go from 400 pages of final content, single spaced, to 110 pages with lots of white on the page. And all of it, so much of it is an illusion. A screenplay isn't a finished product, right? It's a recipe. It's an invitation to collaborate. But every single word, sentence, phrase gets examined in a screenplay. There's just no room. And so scenes have to pull double, triple weight. They have to layer, that layering I was talking about. You don't have room to just go off and have fun with exposition for, 3 chapters to just fill in stuff. Everything's got to be moving all the time. And so it really taught me efficiency. It taught me starting in the middle of a scene. I learned that too from comics, how you I start some scenes when the scene normally ends and we're in the aftermath of a scene and we're trying to catch up to it. I end some scenes before they begin. I like to play with the order of things and the order of storytelling. And of course, things have to be visual. They have to be pushed out of, voiceover. We don't want to get too reliant on that in a screenplay.
Yeah.
Unless you're the Shawshank Redemption, et cetera. And so that's part of it. And I think with novels, what it is an ability to hold a world and a structure in your head. I mean, the good thing with a script is you always know where you are. Like even if, if I'm on page 45, I can reach back 15 pages and grab the lip at the end of the first act, right? I know that, at 45 pages forward's got to be my turn to the third act. You know where you are. You know how those scenes are. With novels, to some extent, you do everything you can, but I feel like you go down into a swamp and then you're underwater and you come back out and you look back over it and you hope it doesn't suck.
I haven't heard that one. That's fucking brilliant though.
I don't think there's a way to hold everything in your head and know that it's all working all the way through the book. I think I've had that maybe once or twice I must have written, I'm close to 30 books now. Not where I knew everything was perfect, but where I didn't have a major crisis at some point, usually for me in the middle, the boggy middle, that things weren't, squared away enough. And you just don't. And in screenplays, they're just as hard. I don't mean to imply that they're easier. There's a formula, but you can kind of hold them all in one place. And with novels, look, we're everything. We're the director, we're the actor, we're hair and makeup, we're the location scout, right? We're the script coordinator, we're continuity. It's every single thing, and so there's a lot that we're holding while we're doing it. And if you find that space when you're writing, that you're in it all the way, it's great. There's nothing better, but it takes a lot of discipline to hold that space.
Yeah, no kidding. Hey, in this latest book, there was something that kind of got my pre-career curiosity juices flowing, in that you had Evan go to a veterans reintegration center where one of the characters was kind of being held, and where you described it as it's for a location for struggling vets who possess significant technological secrets. In your research, did you happen to run across anything like that, or was this totally out of the blue and totally out of your imagination?
Totally made up.
Oh, damn it. I kind of wanted to know.
That's a really cool idea, damn it.
It was.
I was going to dust off my resume and see if I could get a job over there. That was going to be neat.
I was going to make a phone call.
Look, I do. I have a good number of friends in the military community, and one of my close friends founded something called the Honor Foundation, which you might be familiar with. It takes SEALs and special operators, and it's a training course for them to kind of reintegrate, process what happened, and then move into the corporate sector, right?
Yeah.
With higher level placements in Silicon Valley firms, people up to CTOs, CEOs. And it's just a process, because the skills that you're taught in the military as a special operator are the exact opposite of the ones in an interview, right? You sit down at an interview, people go, who are you, where'd you come from, and what do you do, right? Are the first three questions that you never answer if you're an operator. And so, I've always been very interested in that. I have friends who've been out. I've watched them it's like watching elite athletes try and transition, right? But there's
coming out of the Olympics,
there's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of, everyone comes out with some sort of PTSD designation now, and so I think that's something that's always just been kind of close to my, that always hits me a lot, that notion of people who serve their country. I mean, look, that's the basis of what the orphan program is.
Right.
It's like you serve your country, but with zero of the recognition, you have zero of the backup, you're not even sanctioned. And if you're ever caught, you're the cutout man that everything gets blamed on you and you're done. Anytime you can just capture, it's incredible skill sets, that we have, and it's very interesting to me. So you have military special operators, right? You have athletes, and to take that skill set and make it transferable is incredible, right? And there's also stuff, a buddy of mine for a lot of years was the CTO of Intel. He's amazing, but he talks a lot about business structure and stuff. And he talked about trying to get women back into the job force who left to become moms, right? So at the end of a 15-year span of raising kids, like they have this whole amazing other skill set, right? They have a career that they might have decided to put on hold, and to pick that up, right? So now you have, and there's like few people in the world more competent than moms too. Yeah. It's like there's this whole skill set sitting there, and we tend to be so dismissive, like we cubbyhole people and then we leave them, right? Yeah. Like you worked, then you're a mom, now you're just a housewife. And it's like, there's so many ways that if we can make people feel that sense of worth and know that their skills are transferable to other arenas, it's amazing. And it's funny because I think that's obviously the thing with Evan. I was writing about with him where he's like, he's got this highly unusual skill set. He has unlimited resources and very little to do. Right. So he labors to find conditions under which he can make use of that incredible sort of Olympian level training. Right. With it still being aligned with his moral compass. That's a bigger trick than the rest of us.
Yeah, purpose. Yeah.
He's trying to retire.
Pull me back in.
So we talked a bunch about the book, but we didn't want to give away spoilers because we want people to experience it themselves as they read it. To me, though, the way you ended Prodigal Son, which I loved and hated, seemed like you had already mapped out the next Orphan X story.
I'm getting a lot of love and hate from you today.
Yeah, I know. That's true.
That's Chris.
That's me. That's
he's a conflicting guy. Yeah.
I am.
It's all love for me and Mike.
Yeah. Exactly.
So
good cop, bad cop.
Well, let me ask you though. So did you take a break after completing this book, or did you put your head down and just dive in to the next, the continuing story or the next story?
I took a bit of a break from the books. I had some screenplay, TV, comic, other stuff circulating a little bit. So, but no, I got back in pretty quickly, I would say. I get nervous. I mean, I can take a break once I've cracked into a new book. If I have, 30, 40, 60 pages down, I can chill. Like if I have a big other project on my shoulders, I don't want to have starting a book out in the future. I want to crack into it at least now. And then I can go, if I owe a pilot or something else, I can leave it. So I tend to break ground early and then take a pause if need be.
Did you do that on the one that's coming after this?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Feel free to send us the pages. We'll let you know if it's any good.
Hey, what's the title of that book? Hey, Greg, let's raise a glass, boys. You have completed the traditional portion of this interview, and now we're going to ask you silly questions and hopefully get silly answers from you.
No pole vaulting questions this year.
No, none. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the Marvel movie AntMan? And did you watch any of it for inspiration while writing this book?
7 and no.
All right, cool. All right. I do like Paul Rudd though. He's pretty good.
He's terrific. He's terrific. Yeah. And it's so affectionate. It's such a great, Marvel movies are, you just know there's a quality level that's going to be there. You know, they're enjoyable.
Yeah.
And I remember when
at any age, enjoyable at any
Marvel
age.
years ago, and Axel Alonso, who was the then editor in chief, was saying, look, do you want to write or read up AntMan? I was like, dude, I couldn't have less interest in AntMan. Like, why are you even asking me that? He said, there's a big tentpole movie coming. I'm like, no one's going to see AntMan. What are you talking about? That's like a joke character from when I was in 7th grade. It's so funny how these things change,
Yeah.
But I remember, like, I knew that was coming down the pipeline for a lot of years. I just couldn't believe it.
Wow. Huh.
Dude, that's
All fair. I have a story.
all right. As Evan's character has grown involved, I've become curious as to who in his life he cherishes the most. So if Joey, Tommy, Mia, or Peter are inside a burning building that's about to collapse, and Evan Smoke can only save one, who's he run in and grab?
Dude, but that's the wrong question. I can answer it if you stopped at the first part, but he's going to figure a way to get everyone out.
Oh, okay.
He figured out a lot harder than that, my friend.
Yeah, that's right.
Kind of knew how you were going to answer.
You overreached.
I know.
If I just asked on affection,
Right.
I would have answered, but now the opportunity is passed.
Leading question, Your Honor. Yeah.
That's what I do. I lead. Never mind. You and Bob Crace are good friends, right?
That's right.
Have you two ever talked about collaborating or writing some kind of crossover?
We have not.
Oh, you should get on that right away.
There's a lot of, yeah.
Evan and Elvis are both hanging out in LA all the time.
Yeah, I know. And here's the other thing.
Cross paths.
He told us he wanted to kill off Joe Pike, right?
That's right.
And
I
you
think
wanted to
about
kill
that
off
story.
Joey.
I think of that story all the time. He goes, man, best financial decision I made in my life.
That's what we said. Like, you wanted to kill him. What?
I know.
Yeah. I'm a Joe Pike guy too.
Oh, me too. I love them both, but like when I see a Joe Pike novel, my adrenaline spikes because I'm like, this is going to be badass.
Yeah.
I think the two of you writing together would be spectacular. So.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
You know how he's always saying that he would never. He doesn't want Elvis to be adapted because he can't imagine who could play Elvis and it would ruin it for him. So I don't know if you saw our interview with him, but we turned it on him and I asked him who would play the dog from Suspect. Tell us that.
That's great.
All right, I'm up. All right, so number one. Like the free flow water beds of the late 1970s,
I'm going to take a drink here.
Evan Smoke's floating bed begs the question, how would having sex on it not turn into a wrestling match in an inflated bounce house?
All right. Well, the answer to that is that it's remarkably stable because the magnets are so strong and the cables tether it that you can't budge that thing. I mean, it's an incredibly powerful magnetic force that's shoving it up. So it's it's as stable as an airplane, and plenty of people have sex on airplanes.
He's thought about this question before.
Yeah.
So, all right, here we go. Number two, is Evan Smoke's penthouse insured? And if so, how much?
No.
I didn't think
that becomes relevant. That becomes relevant quickly.
Oh. Brilliant. All right, number three, what was your New Year's resolution?
I had a couple. Some of them, it's around, a lot of it for me is around getting better parameters around time management for all the things, right? There's an array of things I want to do to work out. There's an array of things I want to do creatively and with my creative time. There's bad habits I'm always trying to prune back, even if it's as, the amount. A lot of it is focused on how much completely focused time that I can get anywhere. So that's the thing. It's sort of like with Evan. It's like if I'm, how you do anything's how you do everything. I want to do less things distracted. I want to do most things only doing the thing itself, right? And it takes a lot to find that mindset. There's a lot in the course of a day or a week or a month or a year that pulls you out of that. And I'm, so part of it is to try to be 100% focused on the things that I'm doing.
Funny how we had this conversation between the three of us not about an hour and a half ago.
Yeah, it's true. True.
Wow.
Okay, we talked a little bit. Chris mentioned AntMan. We know you're a big comic guy. Which comic book character could you really nail in a screenplay more than any other?
Well, my longest run on a comic was Batman. I wrote Batman for 2 years, and I loved writing the villains. I like how each villain in the Rogues Gallery is a different reflection and brings out a different part of Batman's psychology. And so, for me, I wrote a story called Pain and Prejudice that was that I wanted to write a backstory worthy of the Penguin, who's one of my favorite characters. He's the only one in the Rogues Gallery who's sane, I think. Right? Everyone else is insane.
Right.
And if you're him, Batman's a bully. Batman's bigger, stronger, good looking, right? Everything about him is bullying. And I love Alan Moore's Killing Joke, or most aspects of it. I think it's just it's a terrific sort of bizarre psychological kaleidoscope view into a background of that character. And I wanted to write something in that vein to bring that out in the Penguin. So I would love to write a Batman movie that's focused on a primary villain, I would say, the way that Todd Phillips did so brilliantly in Joker, which I thought was just mind-blowingly good.
Nice.
Okay, and the last one's a little easy. Well, easier in one way. It's a little bit less serious. But what 4 writers, dead writers, do you invite to your poker party?
Oh, man. Faulkner, Joyce, Shakespeare. They have to be dead, you said?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And Oscar Wilde.
Nice.
Party.
I don't know if any of them can play poker.
Who's the best poker player that year?
Oscar
Man,
Wilde.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well,
that's a good one. That's a lot of fun. I bet Faulkner could kick ass at poker.
Yeah, no
I bet
kidding.
he'd just crush some poker.
probably.
That boy could drink, man.
Yep.
Yeah, that's part
He
of
can
it.
hang with us.
Yeah, he can come on the show anytime.
Hey, boys, let's raise a glass. Greg, you are always welcome on the show. Prodigal Son. I'm going to go out and say this is it's January, the beginning of January.
Yep.
This is the best book of the year. No, I'm going to find hard to read. We're going to read a lot of books. We're going to read a lot of books, and this is just me saying it. We're going to read a lot of books this year, but for them to top this would be a
Good luck.
big feat.
Thank you very much.
So let's raise a glass and cheers to you, sir, for writing one
Cheers
hell
to
of a
all
book.
you. Thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure to talk books with people who love, the peeling back the layer and looking at the guts of storytelling.
Yeah, that's where it's at, man.
It is. Till next
Thank
time.
you all.
Boys, holy crap. Gregg Hurwitz, first of all, the guy's super intelligent, and he writes a kick-ass book, Prodigal Son. I loved this book. I know you guys love the book. We talked about it. It is one of my favorites.
Agreed.
I'm going to say hands down, 2021 just started. This will probably, at the end of this year, will be my favorite book. We got a lot of books to read, but that may be my favorite of the whole time. So let's raise a glass and thank Gregg Hurwitz for coming on the Crew Reviews again and slaying it. Cheers.
Cheers, boys.
Brilliant man, brilliant book.
Oh. This is Chris, also rugged and also unshaven in so many ways. And this is the outro for Gregg Hurwitz and Prodigal Son. There it is. Yeah.